Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from South Carolina, we have Trey Morrow. Trey is an animal liberation activist. He is the co-founder of Animal Activism Mentorship, a program that empowers humans to take action for animals by providing one-on-one mentorship and a supportive community. Welcome, Trey.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Honored to be here.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. First of all, I want to thank you for everything that you are doing for the animals. It's just so fantastic.
I appreciate that. Thanks for all you do. This podcast is awesome.
Thanks. Now, I'm very excited to discuss the Animal Activism Mentorship program with you. But first, I would like to dive into your vegan journey. How and when did you transition to a plant-based diet?
I'm about to be 32 now, and when I was, I think, 19, I was in a band. And a lot of the other guys in my band were pescatarian, basically vegetarian, but still ate sea life. And I was noticing that I felt pretty horrible after I ate meals because I was eating pretty horribly. So it made sense. But I didn't realize how horribly I was eating. So we had a cookout one day amongst the band members, and they had been trying to get me to go pescatarian or go vegetarian for a while. And I tried one of the veggie burgers after a lot of peer pressure. And I thought, I could do this. I think I could do this. So, that kind of is what started me. If you rewind even further back to when I was 16, a friend of mine that I was jamming around with showed me some slaughterhouse footage of cows. And I was 16. Social media wasn't really a big thing back then, if it was a thing at all. I don't remember quite when that happened, but I remember going to McDonald's afterwards because that's all I knew to do, just because that's kind of, the habits that I had formed even from a child. I loved Happy Meals. I loved all that stuff. And then, of course, I found out they're not that happy. But I remember looking at my burger and just thinking, I have to eat this because there's nothing else to eat, but I feel bad about eating it. I didn't understand that there was another way. And then, fast forward to when I was 19 and all of that happened with my band, and I started down a pescatarian, quote unquote, road. I don't even really like that word, pescatarian, but so I was eating sea life, and I really kind of quickly got into it for the animals. It started out for health, but I started learning more about the animals. I remembered that moment when I was 16, when I saw that slaughterhouse footage, and I thought, this is really the way to go. But I was still being a hypocrite because I was eating fish, and the excuse that I gave myself for eating those sea animals was that, they're caught out of their natural habitat. It's not like a factory farm. Obviously my views have evolved a lot since then, but I looked at the bottom. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I looked at the bottom of the box of the tilapia bodies that I had been buying, and it said farm raised. And I was like, farm raised? When I think of a farm, I think of, a big red barn and hay and land animals.
Right.
So that was confusing to me. I got on YouTube or on the internet somewhere and, Googled that or YouTubed that, and I found fish farms. I found footage of that, and it was some of the most horrific footage that I had ever seen, and it affected me just as much as that cow footage had years before. It was images of these fish, and they were swimming around in barrels all crammed on top of each other, swimming in each other's, feces and this and that. And it was horrendous to watch. And I watched that video. Later that night, there was a guy that was over at my apartment, and I said, "Hey, do you want the rest of this? Because I am never eating this again." In that moment, I went vegetarian, and that was, I guess, like 11 or 12 years ago now. And unfortunately, I continued with vegetarianism for about 7 years until I fully understood what happens in the dairy, egg, and honey industries. And then once I got a full grasp of that, I decided to go totally vegan. When I decided to go vegan, I didn't know that there were amazing vegan cheeses. I was a cheeseaholic. Even my friends called me a cheesetarian when I was a vegetarian because I ate so much cheese. But I didn't know that there were all these amazing foods. So when I decided this, when I made this decision to go vegan, I thought that it was going to be this huge sacrifice. I was like, I'm doing the right thing for the animals here, but man, it's going to be a bummer eating salads and smoothies every day.
Right.
Which now I actually really like salads and smoothies, but at the time that seemed like a nightmare. But I quickly discovered there were all these amazing vegan cheeses and vegan burgers and vegan pizza, vegan hot dogs, vegan ice cream, all of the, you know, comfort foods and junk food and eventually I discovered the healthier foods too. Everything's there, and it's really not a sacrifice at all. The only thing I had to sacrifice were my own traditions, my own cruelty, and my own ego. And yeah, so now I've been vegan for a little over 4 years, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made.
That seems to be the way, right? That whenever people take the time to understand what actually happens, and then they go vegan, and then everybody's like, this was one of the best things that I ever decided for myself. And I think that's what we're getting at, right? Is deciding things for yourself as opposed to the way your parents ate or the way other people have instructed you to eat throughout your life. Is that something that you found as well?
Yeah, definitely. And my mom, for example, she's never eaten a lot of animal flesh. I remember, she would eat some cow flesh like maybe once a month when I was growing up, but she thought it was the healthy thing, so she would feed it to me, and that's not her fault. She's, the best mom in the world. Like she
Mm-hmm.
just didn't know. She didn't know the torture behind it. She didn't know the pain. She didn't know the killing. She didn't know that it was unhealthy. And now my mom is a vegetarian, working on getting her to vegan. Still working on that. But she's made great strides in the getting toward that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think if she had known, maybe things would have been different when I was growing up. But we've all been under this spell. We've all been under this illusion that we need animal quote unquote products to survive, to be healthy, to have optimal health. And it's just a lie. I mean, I went vegan for the animals. That is why I did it.
Mm-hmm.
But I cannot deny the health benefits. I lost 65 pounds from the time that I ate meat to the time that about like 5 weeks after I went vegan. I was 300 and something pounds at one point as a teenager. And now I'm, way below that. And, like I said, that's just a plus because the reason I went vegan is for these animals, but, being healthier as a benefit, I mean, that's amazing. I'm the healthiest I've ever been in my 30s, healthier than I was as a teenager. And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, there is. And I think that's one of the things that the industries hide from us. They hide the fact that number one, the cruelty, number two, the health. And that's one of the biggest issues is how people are kept in the dark. I think that one of the things that they do well is marketing. They market it so that it seems that everyone can't live without it. What do you feel is the best way to kind of fight that marketing?
Well, that's a good question. I think that we need to attack it from all angles. I think we need to post online about it. I think we need to, share our stories one on one. I think we need to make films about it, and there's already, been several films about this. Yeah, I think we need to attack it from all angles, and we need our food guides to change closer to like what Canada has done with their food guide. We just need the truth out there. I mean, as you know, and as many people I'm sure that listen to your podcast know, I mean, this is just all, it's a lot of things behind the scenes here because big ag, big pharma, and the government are all working together to create this illusion and to make money off of you and me and off of the animals. The big pharma makes a ton of their money by providing the antibiotics that these farmed animals ingest. 80% of antibiotics are fed to quote unquote livestock. And the government, provides these subsidies, or I should say, you and I, the taxpayer,
Right.
Through force of the government, provide subsidies for these animal farmers. And of course, we could just save so much land, so much water, and most importantly, so many animal lives if we all just ate plants and ate from the ground directly instead of growing all these crops to then feed to the animals to then eat. And I don't like thinking of animals in terms of calories. I think of animals in terms of their individuals. But when you're feeding a cow, plants and plants and more plants and more plants, there's not a great caloric return on that investment. Why aren't we just eating these plants directly?
Right.
It's a mystery to me, but I'm very hopeful that people will speak up because you asked me an interesting question: how do we combat this? And it's through people speaking up. It's through activism because veganism is the first step in a lot of cases. Veganism is an excellent step. I've heard this used a lot. This little parable, I guess you could say. If you are walking down the street and you see a dog and someone's beating up on that dog, if you just walk on by and you don't do anything at all, but you don't partake in the cruelty, but you also don't, do anything about it, that's veganism. Veganism is passive. It just means that you're not partaking in the violence. That's all that it means. Now, if you were to walk by and start kicking the dog along with this guy, then that's carnism, I guess you could say.
Right.
And then if you walk down the street and you intervene, you get in between this person beating the dog and the dog, you call somebody or intervene somehow. That's activism. And it is up to each and every one of us. Now that we know the truth about what happens to these animals. We know the truth about these lies that we've been told about the environment, about our own health, and each one of us has a burden to bear. Now we have to take on this task of getting the truth out there, of liberating these animals systemically and through outreach and through direct action. And yeah, we all have to play our role, whatever that role is within the activism community. We have to do that now. It's our burden to bear. It's our responsibility because we know the truth. And when you have the burden of knowing, you have the burden of responsibility. And so it's up to each and every one of us now.
Now, how did you become an animal activist? Did you just, I don't know, pick up a microphone and a bullhorn and just go out somewhere and just start talking? Or did you meet somebody and they influenced you?
I wish it had happened like that right away. But as soon as I went vegan, I knew that I wanted to be an activist. I just wasn't really sure how. I wasn't sure what to do. At the time, I was living in Alabama. And as you can imagine, there's, not too many vegans and activists, at least that I knew of at the time, in Alabama. And so, I was posting stuff online. I was doing things like that, which that's great. yeah, eventually, an old friend of mine that I used to work with, she was vegan when I was vegetarian, and she used to always try to get me to go vegan. And I was like, oh, I love cheese too much and all that. But
Hmm.
we reconnected after I went vegan. I told her I went vegan and all that, and she was like, hey, a friend of mine is coming through your town on an activism tour. Could he maybe crash at your house? And I was like, yeah, sure. It sounds great. I want to meet another activist. That's
Hmm.
amazing. So his name was Yuri, and he was with his friend Yuki, and they stayed over at my apartment, and we ate some vegan meals. He was actually handing out leaflets where I worked the next day. So on my lunch break, I went out there and joined them, and that was my first street activism ever. Was handing out leaflets with Vegan Outreach, which is who he was with. I talked to a lot of people who were in the agriculture industry, and I didn't quite know what I was talking about when I was talking to them. It was definitely an eye-opening experience. I'm so thankful that I got that opportunity to get out on the streets, and that man just happened to be coming through. And I actually just got back from Chicago doing activism, and I got to meet that guy again for the first time since we did activism together back in 2017. We got to do activism together in Chicago, and that was a surreal moment for me. And yeah, we just talked about how much has happened since then in both of our activism, and it was a really awesome moment to be able to share that with him after all these years.
No, that's great. What is it about animal activism that makes you so passionate?
I don't even know if passion's the right word. I have a passion for it, but it's just the right thing to do. And these victims, they have a voice, but their voices are being heavily suppressed in factory farms, in cages, in places of oppression and violence. They cannot communicate with humans the same way that other humans can. And of course, humans have all the power in this world. But that's why. I mean, because it's empathy. If I were in their place, I would want someone to try and help me. I cannot imagine what it must be like to be a mink trapped in a fur farm, gnawing at the cage, trying to break free, circling around and around, watching my friends die in front of me, having to eat my friends after they die to survive. I can't
Mm.
imagine being a chicken in a factory farm. My execution date planned before I was ever conceived. My mother sexually abused in order for me to even be conceived, and then genetically bred to where my legs are breaking out from under me, and I can't even get to water because I'm so weak and I'm only 5 or 6 weeks old. And then the first time I ever see sunlight is when I'm on a truck headed to the slaughterhouse. I mean, I just can't imagine what that must be like. I never will be able to imagine it, probably.
Mm.
Um, but I've put myself in their position to the best of my ability. And because I have, that is why I'm an activist, because this is an extreme injustice. And if it were me, I would want to be free. I would want to at least know that someone was fighting for me. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do, is fight for them, save lives, because life is what we have. It's the most precious gift that we have. In addition to time and family and friends and love and happiness and relationships, those are the things that animals have, the things that truly matter. And humans take every bit of that from them. For what? For a fashion statement, for taste, pleasure, for culture or tradition or convenience. It's a shame. Shame's not a big enough word, but it's a shame. And yeah, we all need to be fighting against this. It's our responsibility to be activists for someone, even if it's not animals. There's all kinds of injustice in this world, and we should all be fighting for something, whether it be fighting for this animal rights movement or something else. We should all be fighting against oppression in some kind of way. And I've found my niche, I think, in my role in this movement, and I'm just trying to keep going with that to the best of my ability.
Now, how do you keep going? I mean, it must be difficult. How do you keep fighting the good fight?
That's a great question. Sustainable activism, for me, like vigils, bearing witness to animals who are about to die or are dying. I used to do a lot of that. And, I think that's important work to do. It's important to comfort the animals. It's important to document their plight. But I was doing that a lot. And I was starting to burn out. And it's a hard thing to say the best thing for me to do for the animals is to step away from the animals. And that's what I had to do. And of course I was still fighting for animals in other ways, but yeah, it was a constant toll on my mind when I was doing that. Some people can handle it better than others. For me, I could handle it, but yeah, after a while it takes a toll when you're doing it all the time. So I would recommend for activists not to feel pressure to do a certain thing. Find the activism that's sustainable for you. Find, your special skill, just like you, Fred. Your special skill is interviewing people, asking amazing questions, and telling stories, and that's a part of all this. And with me, I'm a filmmaker. I try to do things that way. I'm an organizer. I try to do things that way, and I try to use my skills, and we should all be doing that. But for me, when I get together with a group of activists, it's such a weird juxtaposition because on one hand, I wish we never had to fight for this to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
In some weird way, I wish I didn't even have to know these people, because the only way we know each other is because of all the horrific violence that happens to animals. That's what has brought us together. But on the other side of that juxtaposition is there's all this sadness, but look, these are amazing people who are taking time out of their day, taking time out of their week, out of their lives, sacrificing time with their families, time with their friends, time doing the things that they enjoy. They are sacrificing all of that for a bigger cause, for those less fortunate than themselves, the animal victims. And that keeps me going. That inspires me so much to see what other people are doing for animals. And, I just got back from that activism trip to Chicago that I briefly mentioned. And there were people there that I had already done activism with that, I expected great things from. There were people there that I knew online but had not met in person that just blew me away with their activism. And there were people that I didn't even know beforehand that blew me away with their activism. Not just their activism, but their drive, their will to win for the animals, their relentlessness, their perseverance. It was incredibly inspiring. And I think we all inspired each other. And that's what we have to do too. Community is such an important part of activism and sustainable activism, which is what we're talking about right now, sustainable activism.
Mm-hmm.
Community is so important because you need to be around like-minded people. You need to be around people who understand you. You need to be around people who will have your back. I can't express enough how important that is. And whenever I organize an action, I do my best to have some kind of social thing afterwards. So if we go do a protest, hey, let's all go out and enjoy some great vegan food together afterwards. And I think that's activism too, because we need to vent to each other. We need to have that camaraderie. We need to do all those things in order to keep going. If we keep it strictly business and do nothing but activism, and we say bye and don't say another word to each other, that's not how you build communities. And communities are what get things done for the animals, and with any type of activism at all. So I think all of those things are extremely important. To recap on that, find activism within your wheelhouse, within your niche. do something that you love within activism if you can to keep it sustainable, and surround yourself, if at all possible, whether it be online or in person, with like-minded people who care about you and will have your back and do activism with you when they can.
How have you found to be the most effective ways to change people's minds?
I think what's effective is different for every activist. It's different for every activist, and it's different for every person that you're talking to. We all try to find this perfect form of activism, what's most effective. It's really hard to prove. It's really hard to prove what's most effective. When you're even when you're talking to people one on one, even if they say, "Hey, I'm going to go vegan after what you said to me," I mean, I consider that a victory. But they might go home and try it for 3 days and not be vegan anymore. There's no way to track it, unfortunately. And I don't mean that to be a downer. I just mean it to be realistic. We don't have a way of always tracking these conversations and stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, each activist should do what's sustainable for them, something that they can continue to do. And that's what's most effective, because they'll be able to keep doing it. I also really just want to talk for a moment about strategic pressure campaigns. This is something that is somewhat new to me. I've always focused on outreach and education, which are both extremely important as well. But for me, there's been this new world of strategic pressure campaigns. And I think that is something that's really sustainable too, if you're getting victories, because people want to win. And the fur industry right now, I mean, they are just toppling over one by one. These stores are going fur free. And it feels good to win. It's part of sustainability, I think. It feels so good to win. We target these stores that sell fur, and we don't relent until they make a public announcement that they're going fur free. And when I think about all the animals that'll no longer be bred into existence, have to be in a cage, have to be skinned alive, have to be electrocuted, that helps me keep going, because I know that's something tangible. I know that I've helped make a difference in this. So I think that's something great as well, is pressure campaigns that are tangibly winnable. Not to take anything away from outreach and education, where we don't always get to see the fruits of our labor, because those things are so very important as well. But wow, being a part of pressure campaigns lately has just really been driving me. It's really been great. I'm so excited to be a part of winning pressure campaigns. I mean, it's an amazing feeling.
How can we get the message to young people? One of the things that I've heard is putting some of the documentaries into schools.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a whole lot of ways to do that. Getting into schools is a great opportunity, whether it be speaking or showing videos or whatever. But I think something that people don't talk enough about are all of the amazing young activists that are out there. There were a few very young activists. I wish I remembered all their ages. One of them's 10, and the other two are younger than that were in Chicago with me on this activism convergence. One of them had a one-on-one conversation with a police officer about why we were out there protesting fur. He basically said something now this is a young child. He said something to the effect of, "Hey, do you have dogs at home?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, what would you do if somebody was in the street trying to harm your dog?" He said, "Well, I would arrest that person or intervene somehow." Then the kid said, "What's the difference between your dog and these animals that we're fighting for?" And the police officer began to cry right in the middle of the street. And he said, "There is no difference." And then there was two other kids, and one of them gave a speech in front of Louis Vuitton about the alligators that are skinned alive and have rods put into them and everything else, and he talked about the agonizing death that they go through, and the gravity of something like that when it comes from the mouth of a child is incredible. He had people in tears when he gave that speech. And I think that the security guard even really listened to what he had to say, because I think people underestimate kids. And when a kid grabs the microphone, somebody might think, oh, they're just letting this kid do this to be cute, or, give him a turn or give her a turn, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are speaking profound truth. I think getting to the young people will have a lot to do with the kid activists that we have, and listening to them, listening to what happens to these animals from one of your peers, somebody that you can understand, somebody that puts it into a language that you can understand. And kids have taught me, sometimes I muddy things up, and kids really know how to simplify things, make things very clear. I think we all have a lot to learn from kids, but kids have a lot to learn from each other, and it's important that we instill these values in our kids. For those of us that are parents, I'm not, but I commend all of the parents that are, teaching their kids these things and empowering their kids to be activists. I think that's a huge way that young people are going to be affected, and hopefully take change in their own personal lives to switch to a plant-based diet and be vegan, and also to be inspired by these other kids and realize that they have the power to speak up and become activists themselves.
Now, let's say that one of our listeners is passionate about animals. How does that person become an animal activist?
There's so many different forms of activism, like we've talked about already, and I've already talked a little bit about the importance of sustainable activism and finding your niche, using your special skills for the animals. If you're a mechanic, you can use that for the animals. If you're a plumber, you can find a way to use that for the animals. If you're in video, graphic design, if you're a member of the clergy, you can find a way to use that to the animal's advantage, I promise you. So whatever special skill you have, use that. And I guess this would be a good time to bring up, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I'm a part of a program called Animal Activism Mentorship. And what we do is provide a free service for people who are wanting to become activists. They don't know how, or maybe they're already been doing a little bit of activism. Maybe they've already been doing a little bit of activism and they don't know how to get plugged in with their local communities. Maybe they've been doing activism on their own, or maybe they've been doing activism for years, but now they want to step it up, or they want to learn about a different form of activism. Any of those things, we can help you. So people can go to animalactivismmentorship.com and click Take Action. And there you can fill out a form, and we will take the information from that form and pair you with an experienced activist as a mentor who will reach out to you. And, you can jump on a call and, talk about what your goals are, what you want to do, and everything like that. And, one of our mentors can help you achieve your activism goals, get involved, or whatever it is that you want or need to do. We can help you with that. So that's animalactivismmentorship.com. Again, click Take Action and fill out the form, and we can help you with that.
That's a great program. I think that that's one of the things that a lot of people want to do something, but they don't know how. And now you've provided a space for people just to click and have somebody help you along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked earlier about the importance of community. Not only does AAM provide mentors, but we also provide a community. And we do in-person events where, if you've never done activism before, or maybe you've never done a certain type of activism before, you can come out to the event. If you want to just watch and see how the others do it and see if it's for you, you can do that. If you want to participate hands-on, and you've got kind of some veteran activists to catch you if you fall, or give you some guidance in the moment, there's that opportunity as well. We also do online workshops where people can learn more about different types of activism, different types of strategies for activism, and even, like self-care stuff. We do all of that. And the community part of it, like we talked about earlier, is just so very important. Yeah, there's all kinds of different pots that AAM has their hand in when it comes to, activism and helping people become active. And the community that has come up from this is just incredible. Like I said, I've just met so many inspiring people, and that's what helps me to keep going all the time, every day.
I was watching a video of yours that said that people align our actions with our morals, and we no longer have to be hypocrites to say that we love animals, but our actions say differently. That seems to be one of the things that I find happens all the time. Why do you think people have such a difficult time aligning their actions with their morals?
Because change is scary for people. Change is scary for people. It was scary for me when I decided to go vegan. At the time, I had this tradition at my grandparents' house. I was living in another state at the time, but when I would come home and visit, we would do meals together. And when I was living in the state, we would do meals every Sunday at my grandparents' house. And I was so afraid to ask my Meemaw. Yes, my Meemaw. I'm from South Carolina. It's my grandmother that I'm talking about. So I was so afraid to ask my Meemaw to change up her, famous macaroni and cheese recipe. But I said, "Hey, Meemaw, can you like do what you always do, but like use this vegan cheese and use this vegan butter?" And she was like, "Yeah, sure," and it was fine. And she accommodated for me. And at first, it was just me with my little plate of vegan mac and cheese. She'd make a small little separate thing for me. And when she'd make chocolate oatmeal cookies, she'd make a little separate thing for me. But she quickly realized that the cookies taste exactly the same. So she doesn't make the, breast milk cookies anymore. Uh, and she quickly realized that, more of us were starting to eat the vegan mac. My girlfriend went vegan about a year after I did, and then my sister switched to a plant-based diet after that. And yeah, I mean, most of us were eating the vegan stuff. So now there's not a breast milk macaroni at me, mom, and papa's house on Sunday anymore. So it's worth it. I mean, not everybody's story is going to end up like that. I know, people are really particular about their traditions and stuff, but it's the right thing to do. And ultimately, nobody wants to be a hypocrite and nobody wants to be an animal abuser. But if you knowingly participate in animal abuse, then you're an animal abuser. It's not that you're a bad person. You just have been conditioned. You've been conditioned to be an animal abuser, and you don't even know it. And I didn't even know it. I was an animal abuser for 27 years of my life. That's the vast majority of my life. I'm about to be 32, and that's hard to deal with. It's hard to look back and say like, wow, I contributed to this and all the activism I'm doing. I mean, we've had some great wins and everything like that. And I feel like I've achieved a good bit with my activism, but it's probably just put a dent, a little tiny dent in all the animals that have lost their lives on my behalf. We can't change the past. We can't change what we've done already, but we can change what we do now, and we can change what we do in the future. And change is necessary, even though it's hard for people. Change is necessary. If we don't change, more animals are going to continue to die. Our health is going to continue to decrease. And eventually, we're not going to have a planet because animal agriculture contributes so much to water pollution, soil pollution, air pollution. I mean, the environment's going to be destroyed beyond what it already is if we don't stop. I don't think people understand like that some of this stuff we're not going to be able to reverse. I mean, species extinction is happening every day. First of all, we need to preserve life as much as we can, sentient life. And selfishly, for us humans, we do need all these other species. Like we need biodiversity in order for us to live on this planet. And
Yeah.
people can only see what's right in front of them. It's like a smoker who continues to smoke cigarettes. I haven't gotten cancer yet. Well, you're probably going to if you keep smoking. It's happening slowly. It's happening gradually. You can't watch it happen every time you smoke a cigarette, but it is happening. And that's the same thing that's happening with the earth. Uh, but humans are the ones that are the cancer.
What is one habit, hack, or tip that helps you stay on track with your plant-based diet?
I don't really have anything like that. I just don't have a desire to, harm animals. That's it. There's no real tip or hack or anything like that. I respect animals. I value their lives, and that's it. Their lives are more important than my taste pleasure or whatever. I don't even crave animal foods anymore, quote unquote foods. Animals are not food, but people pretend that they are. But so yeah, I don't really have any hacks like that. Now, when I first went vegan during my transition, what I did is I just veganized the foods, quote unquote, that I already loved.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my tip for people who are transitioning to a plant-based diet, is to do that. Also, a tip that I would have is to look at the products in your household and make sure they're not tested on animals, because that's something that was not really on my radar. I went vegan. I was eating a plant-based diet, and I eventually started to discover, oh, these sanitary wipes that I'm using are not vegan, because veganism is not a diet, right? Veganism is a way of life that excludes intentional harm to animals as far as practically possible. So, yeah, was it possible for me to switch to some products that don't test on animals? Yeah, and that's part of veganism. Making sure you're not wearing leather and silk and wool and fur. All these things are part of veganism. So, yeah, I would recommend also people just be wary of those things too, and keep an eye out and make sure that everything that you're buying is or consuming one way or another is actually vegan. So that's something I would throw out there too.
Do you know if there is a book that gives instructions on what companies are testing on animals?
No, there's some sources online. I usually just Google everything. There's not one source that I really go to for all that. I just research every individual thing. If it's not certified vegan, or if I don't know already that it's vegan, I look it up, because not only to see if they're tested on animals, but some of these ingredients on the back of these products are a joke. Like I don't even know what some of this stuff is, and they sneak things in there like crushed up bugs. They've got a word for it.
Right.
or they use a dye. Like maybe everything seems to be vegan, but they use a dye that they tested on animals. Maybe they dropped it in their eyeballs to see how they reacted to it, or something like that, just so they could turn their candy red or blue or yellow, or something like that. Something so trivial compared to torture of an animal. So yeah, I just try to research everything. It's kind of a pain in the butt at first to do all that, but you start to get the hang of it. You start to memorize some things, and of course, all that little bit of extra work is worth it to not be contributing to an animal's suffering or death.
What cookbook or book have you gifted to somebody transitioning to a plant-based diet?
I guess I haven't been generous enough to gift anybody any book.
What happens if you meet somebody in an activism and they say, well, where can I learn more about this? What would you answer to that?
I usually recommend like online sources. There's an amazing group of people over in the UK. They call themselves the Vegan Switch. And I tell people to go to theveganswitch.org. And what they will do is mentor people as far as going vegan on a case-by-case basis. Like, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's an individual mentorship, kind of like animal activism mentorship that I do, but this is for getting people help to go vegan. So I do recommend that a lot. I love that program. And while I haven't gifted anybody any books yet, I have recommended some books, but they're all like activism based. Some books that I've read recently that I've told other people to check out. For example, like some of my mentees through AAM and just some of my other activist friends to inspire them. There's a book called Until All Are Free, and it's about the Swedish Animal Liberation Front. And there's some really inspiring photos and stories in that book. The left side is Swedish and the right side is English. So if you speak either of those languages, you get to enjoy. Also, I read a book recently called Christianity and the Rights of Animals by Andrew Lindsay. And it's a dense book, but there's just so much good stuff in there. And especially me living in the Bible Belt, I'm a Christian myself too. And, you get a lot of pushback from Christians when it comes to veganism. So I recommend that book to people. I also recommend Bear Boy by Justin Barker. What an inspiring story. I read that book front to back in one night, stayed up till 4 a.m. reading it. Incredible, incredible story. If you know anyone who's thinking about getting active for the animals, or anyone who's been doing activism and maybe they're kind of like burned out a little bit and need a boost, recommend that book, Bear Boy by Justin Barker. And currently I am reading Liberate by Peter Young, who's an animal liberation activist. He was jailed, put in prison for freeing a lot of animals from fur farms. I'm about halfway through that book right now, and it's been so inspirational and incredible. So I'll recommend all those books. And the book that I have in my queue is a book by my friend Matthew King, and he just released a book called I Will Abolish the Bow. And I wish I could tell you more about it. I haven't read it, but yet I'm going to next. But Matthew is just such an incredible activist. He is very well versed in Christianity. He's a Christian himself. And I can't wait to see what all he's going to cover in that book. And whether you're a Christian or not, reading these books, the one by Andrew Lindsay that I mentioned and the one by Matthew King, if you have a lot of encounters with Christians who try to give you pushback and say, God put animals here for us to eat and blah, 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 having some of this ammunition, so to speak, is good. It's good to read these books and understand where people are coming from and understand more about their belief system, or, honestly, what they think they know about their belief system. And look into that a lot more so that you can get through to those people, hopefully.
Finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan, and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
Well, it's hard to say how I felt in the moment before going vegan. I definitely felt bad physically. But I think before I went vegan, I wouldn't have called myself like an overly selfish person, but I would say like a lot of my desires were selfish. Like I wanted to work and make a bunch of money. I wanted to be in a band and have success there. And there's nothing wrong with working and getting money, or being in a band or having success of any kind. But I think I was focused on that stuff a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
And veganism, which led me to activism, totally shifted my perspective. Now, so many of the things I do are for others, and that in turn actually makes me feel better. So maybe there's a selfish aspect to it too, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something, like I'm part of something. And now I'm not as worried about those other things. I'm worried about the animals that I'm trying to help, the other activists that I'm trying to mentor and inspire. I hope that that'll be my legacy. People talk about their their legacy and what they'll leave behind. I hope that, when I'm gone from this planet, that people will be inspired to take action because of the action that I took. People will be inspired to fight for animals because I did. And yeah, that's just a hope. I can't always know. Sometimes people are nice enough to tell me, but I can't always know what my impact is. That's what I'm striving for. I'm striving to have a good impact on this world, to try to make up for all of the horrible abuse and killing that animals have had to go through on my behalf from before I was vegan, and just try to make up a little bit for. I mean, you can't make it up to those individuals who lost their lives and went through that suffering, of course, but again, we can't change the past, and wallowing in the past doesn't help animals. So I try not to stay focused on that too much, and I try to focus on the positive and what I can do. So I would say the big difference is that my mindset has just shifted so much in what makes me feel fulfilled, what makes me happy, and what I think is important above all, what I think is important, which is getting rid of oppression, liberating animals in some way or form, and inspiring others to do the same, hopefully, and giving them the tools and the resources to do so.
Trey, it's such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What's the best way for people to follow you on social media?
So you can find me on Facebook, Trey Morrow, Treymorrow, just my personal page. You can follow me on Instagram at Trey Morrow, spelled the same way. You can also follow Animal Activism Mentorship. That's where I'm putting a lot of my focus. You can go to animalactivismmentorship.com. You can go to the YouTube page. You can follow Animal Activism Mentorship on Instagram and Facebook. And again, if you know of somebody who wants to be mentored, wants to get into activism and needs a mentor, let them know about animalactivismmentorship.com, or maybe somebody listening to this right now wants to take action for animals, but there's an obstacle and they just don't know how, or maybe there's several obstacles. Please get in touch. Even if you think that you can't be an activist, I promise we will find a way that you can be. Animalactivismmentorship.com. Click Take Action, fill out the form, and we will get you with a mentor who can help you fight for animals in some way, shape, or form. And I hope that I've stressed the importance of activism enough throughout this interview, and whether you do it through AAM or whether you find a way to do it on your own, I hope that everybody here listening, if they're not an activist already, will highly consider that and find a way to fight for animals or against some form of oppression.
Just one note, Animal Activism Mentorship Program is free.
Yes, it's free. We provide free mentorship. We provide free resources, free workshops, and everything like that. Our in-person events, we don't even sell tickets to those. We try our best to fundraise so that the people that come don't even have to cover anything if possible. So we try to make it as accessible as possible to everyone and as free as possible. The mentorship is free. Our resources are free. The only time anybody might spend some money is if they come to one of our events and they buy their own meal afterwards or something like that, maybe.
All right. Thank you so much, Trey, for being on Plant Your Seed.
Honored to be here. Thanks so much. And thanks for all you do. Appreciate it.
Hope you are inspired by this story. And remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review. And until next time, thank you for listening.